We have confirmed reports that the containment regarding the Knox event has failed. Officials are reminding everyone to stay calm, stay indoors, and stay tuned for further instruction.
We are about to show images that may be disturbing to some viewers. Please refrain from tuning in if you are sensitive to such imagery. As you can see, these are not sick people.
Infected? Virus. If you believe that horseshit, then I got a bridge to sell you. The meat. I told you last year they were feeding it to our children, and nobody listened. But now, it's turning everyone into cannibals. Did you hear me? Cannibals?
New York, D.C., Chicago, and Philadelphia have all confirmed similar cases to the Knox infection. Governor McWherter has officially issued a state of emergency across Tennessee. A broadcast from General McGrew came over the air today imploring the healthy to take up arms against the infected. Mayor Harrington has put out a statement discouraging the citizens of Memphis to take such drastic actions.
Governor McGrew has yet to respond adequately, so we implore you to arm yourselves and shelter in place. From inaction to gunning down civilians in the street, the National Guard and law enforcement have taken matters into their own hands. Do not approach the checkpoints or vehicles for any reason.
The total casualties of today's demonstration is estimated to be in the hundreds. Please, from everyone here at Channel 10, we beg you to not approach the perimeter fence. Martial law has been officially declared by the governor to... Hey! You can't come in here! Don't you touch the...
This will be the final broadcast on Channel 3. Our station has been breached by the infected, and all the rumors are true. God bless you all. Stay safe. No!
Sweet citizens of the great state of Tennessee, I know rumors are rising around the construction of more quarantine zones, but please understand that this is for your own protection, and our vigilant military and our reliable local law enforcement are doing everything they can to keep you safe. God bless Tennessee, and God bless America.
Stepping past the threshold of his apartment for the first time in weeks, Grover Mills listens to the unnatural silence of the previously chaotic war zone that was his city. Creeping towards the roof of his building, with the intention of assessing just how broken the world really was, he begins to hear the muffled growls and clumsy feet stirring on the floors below. Being familiar with the violence of desperate people, Grover doesn't hesitate to retrieve a shovel from the crates atop his roof before he casts his eyes over a dead and eerie city. Distracted by a growing pounding just beneath his feet, Grover slinks back down the hallway before realizing that one of the risen dead had sniffed him out. Faced with a twisted mockery of his neighbor as he opens the door, the older survivor instinctively throws the shambling corpse down the stairs before the husk of a man drags himself back up without hesitation. Managing to snap the head of his shovel while beating down the bag of flesh, Grover resigns to stomping his neck over the edge of the stairs until the unwelcome creature finally goes still. Hastily snatching the keys from his pocket, Grover retreats back into his own apartment in search of a sturdier weapon, as he continues to hear the undead beneath him smashing and banging with growing numbers. Initially concerned with acquiring more food so he can hold up in his home longer, Grover invades his neighbor's apartment and digs through his belongings, eventually fashioning a makeshift backpack from the curtains as his worn back already begins to protest. Still accompanied by the orchestra of death battling beneath him, Grover moves down another floor before raiding the other apartments for food and gear, being relieved to find a pair of thick gloves before having to face the ground level. Fighting through another corpse, Grover feels a bit of his experience coming back to him before his rising confidence is met by a wall of undead flesh. Painting the entrance to his building red with the blood of the infected, Grover tries his best to secure the building before finally looting the last apartments he had access to. Getting his hands on a revolver and a bit more food, he retreats back upstairs to catch his breath and to think, as his stubborn mind begins to problem-solve the precarious situation. The commotion he had heard over the past few weeks was now evident, as he cast his gaze over the congested streets and shattered buildings of the once lively city. There was no immediate way for him to flee the death trap of the urban environment, and even if he could reach the perimeter fence, he suspected he'd need more than a crowbar to secure his freedom. Knowing he needed supplies, and that the supplies would surely be guarded by the dead, Grover works through his immediate options before remembering his friend's gun store just down the street. Scouting the path he'd have to take to reach the makeshift armory, Grover feels confident he can deal with the trickle of undead stumbling across the pavement, but not before he had a proper rest. Having to accept that he wasn't as spry as he once was, as he drags a refrigerator into the hallway to block the path, Grover grumbles angrily to himself before forcing his aching body to lug a bed up to the roof. Wanting to have an immediate way to escape if the infected breached his building, Grover forgoes the comfort of his apartment for the moment and uses the last of his energy to drag another heavy fridge up the stairs for his protection. Finding comfort in being able to hear and see any approaching threat in either direction, Grover finally gives into his tired body's demands and shuts his eyes for some much-needed rest. Looking out over the foggy morning to see his path mostly clear, Grover enjoys a momentary ping of relief before he spots the mindless threats clustered by his front door. Assuming he would have to fight merely to make it outside, he slowly makes his way down to the ground floor as the telling sounds of guests rise from below. Surprised by one that moved with an almost frenzied speed, Grover acknowledges an entirely new threat before he snuffs it out like those that came before. Clearing the hallway once more, Grover witnesses the simplicity of these ravenous creatures, their attention easily dominated by whatever lay immediately in front of them. Already thinking on how to take advantage of this knowledge, he's quickly reminded of the very real danger they offer with numbers, though even this retreat simply gives Grover more information to use for his survival. Finally making it fully out of his building and onto the city street, the weary biker half suspects a tidal wave of rotten flesh to overtake him, but settles into a sturdy calm as his feet guide him forward. Shifting through the supplies in the small warehouse next door, Grover's modest anxiety begins to fade away, as it is steadily replaced by an intoxicating mixture of adrenaline and excitement that he hadn't experienced in far too long. Flesh tingling with exhilaration as his neglected muscles fight for his life once more, Grover couldn't pry the smile from his lips as he takes a moment to plan and recover before descending back into the war zone once more. Despite his wild heart wanting to continue, Grover's weak and abused lungs remind him once more of his frailty as he wisely retreats back through the bloodshed he had caused and searches for more options. Having found that the gun store was locked up tight, he surrendered the idea of getting inside for now, but refocused his resolve on the location he had nearly made it to today, which was the parking garage that held his bike. Though it would certainly be difficult to navigate the cluttered city streets with a car or a truck, Grover reckoned that his bike would allow him to maneuver through the maze of undead and twisted metal and provide him a ticket out of the city. Knowing that task was better suited for tomorrow, once his body had a chance to recover, Grover crawls back up to his apartment and indulges in a beer that finally didn't taste like piss as it went down smooth after a hard day's work. Looking over his handiwork one final time before checking on his adoring fans, Grover finds himself quickly acclimating to the intense reality he found himself in, which perhaps would scare most people, but the grizzled roadhog didn't concern himself with being like most people. Thankful for his rooftop as he surveys his area in the morning light once more, Grover wastes little time in climbing down the ladder to his alleyway before setting himself upon the bloody path to the parking garage. Finally making it inside, the grumpy survivor is pissed but not surprised to find his bike missing, once more wiping his plans clean before he resigns to looting and securing the entire block around his apartment. Returning home to offload the contents of his bag and refresh once more, Grover's mind tries to drift towards a few people who had been in his life, but the discomfort of facing that was enough to put his tired feet back onto the asphalt once more. Finding an RV that had been abandoned by the previous owners for being a clunker, Grover scavenges what he can from the interior before facing the tightrope that was the northern side of his city block. Constantly keeping an eye on the large crowd of undead milling about the shops across the street, Grover makes meticulous progress towards the grocery store on the corner that unsurprisingly is locked up just as tight as the gun store. Making it to the loading bay of the market, Grover dispatches the few desperate souls that have been trying to find their way inside, managing to discover a key to the back door amongst them. Happy to have secured a large source of food, Grover double-checks that the doors are locked before leaving the essential location behind. Knowing that moving it all by hand to his apartment would most certainly throw out his back, he decides to let the bounty stay put until he can find a better way to transport it. Starting to clear the building adjoined to his own, Grover moves through the many apartments to gather what resources he can find, while also eliminating any unnecessary noise that would draw the dead towards his home. Coming across a motorcycle helmet that was surely the purchase of some misguided youth, Grover reluctantly pulls the tacky protection over his frowning features as he prays that everyone from his MC is dead. Legs beginning to protest as Grover moves up floor after floor, he eventually stumbles across a sane household that knew how to defend themselves. Discovering a worn-out shotgun laying beside a brand new one, Grover curses his old lady for forcing him to get rid of his own collection, but relishes in the fact that her nagging couldn't hold sway over him anymore. Dragging himself up to the final floor of the building, the already pleased survivor discovers another surprise that leaves him grinning behind the cheap plastic of his face shield. Shifting through the boxes of ammunition, he knows he won't be able to take it all in one trip, but pulls out the shotgun shells with an approving nod before slinking back down towards the apartment that had a use for them. Ridiculously tired and feeling relatively safe in the silent building, Grover dumps the heavy load off his shoulders and fishes through the kitchen before finding a TV dinner that catches his eye. While it wasn't fine dining by any means, it was at least going to be warm, which was a welcome change of pace from the straight-from-the-can meals he had been surviving off of for the past few weeks. Quietly contemplating why someone with 2 shotguns would paint their walls such an ugly color, Grover burns through his cigarette and drifts off to a well-deserved sleep. Loading back up in the morning, Grover starts to feel the stubborn pain building across his body from the persistent demands he had been asking of it. While he wasn't planning on giving up anytime soon, he was constantly reminded that his limitations weren't simply his willpower. Cautiously making his way back towards his apartment, Grover takes care of the few undead that catches his eye before he hears a worrying moan coming from inside his building. First thinking it must have been an infected that had bashed their way upstairs, Grover is caught off guard when he finds the recently turned woman waiting behind a closed door. Dealing with her like any other, Grover checks to make sure none of his things were on her person before he cautiously moves back up to his home. Settling himself with another cigarette, Grover turns to a forgotten journal to try and organize his thoughts.
Well, it's been pretty goddamn quiet the last couple days. Guess everyone's either hiding in a hole or having their insides torn out. Either way, the silence is driving me crazy. so I'm gonna shake things up. Best case scenario, I figure out that blasting these things is pretty effective. Worst case scenario, I turn into Chomper Chow. Time to see if I remember how to shoot straight. Been a good long while since I blasted down a moving target. Gills.
Pulling the trigger for the first time in years, Grover retreats back up to his roof to assess the damage as he watches the infected begin to flock towards his building. Focusing now on clearing the undead growling beneath his feet, he argues the usefulness of his shotgun as he diligently cleaves through its side effects.
Results of my little science experiment. Fired 2 blasts, knocked a couple of them over, and learned that my eyesight ain't what it used to be. Also, fucking hell, I haven't done this much exercise since the old lady had her midlife crisis. Anyway, definitely stuck my pecker in the hornet's nest. Got chompers all over the streets again. Worth using guns? Probably not. Did it make me feel alive for a few seconds? Hell yeah. Gills.
Wanting to test his theory one more time while he was fresh, Grover collects a horde in front of his building before unloading on them with grizzled determination. Finding himself endlessly surrounded and pressured by the frenzied sprinters, Grover's nerves finally get to him as his blood-soaked gloves accidentally snag on the trigger and cause the tired man to truly fear for his life. Retreating to the other corner of his block that he had thankfully already cleared, Grover begins to work his way back towards his home as he watches the stragglers from his commotion continuing to close in. Exhausted and fully appreciating the sheer numbers of undead skulking about the city, Grover builds himself up for the final push to regain his building. Finally getting a clear view of just how many he had attracted as he grows closer to his apartment, Grover knows that getting inside is only half the battle, as all the progress he had made clearing the streets had been reset. Peering at the patient dead lingering outside his shattered windows, Grover carefully steps down the blood-stained hallway before positioning himself for a safe retreat. While his body wanted nothing more than to lie down and rest, Grover knew that if he left these husks lingering overnight, he might just wake up with one of them bashing down his door. Regaining control of his intersection as the afternoon sets in, the tired but sturdy survivor begins to hunt through the nearby vehicles in hopes of finding one that functioned. Managing to find the key for a station wagon parked nearby, his hopes are snuffed out as he examines the car, realizing that the gas tank had been rusted out and made the vehicle near useless in its current state. Finally submitting to the demands of his body as every joint ached, Grover tucks himself back into the comfort of his building and drags himself up each floor as he continues to work through his dwindling options. While he wasn't starving at the moment, and nothing had killed him yet, the wise warrior knew that his situation wasn't sustainable. Being trapped deep within the city was surely a death sentence, whether it be the relentless march of time and diminishing supplies, or the tireless waves of undead that could overwhelm him at any moment. Grover knew that ultimately he had to find a safer place to call home, but there was no way he could set off into the city on foot and expect to last the night without a safe place to fall back to.
I ain't a rocket scientist, but I'm smarter than these sacks of shit. Shotgun? Bad idea. May as well call it a dinner bell and go ahead and stuff my ass in the oven. Jumping over fences? Bad idea. My old ass knees are still moaning about it. Guess I'm stuck dicing these chompers to pieces. Gonna try and make my way over to the bridge. Maybe there's less of them over there. Gills.
Accepting the consequences of what he had done yesterday, Grover gazes over the infested streets of his city once more before turning his eyes towards the nearby bridge and hoping it was a symbol of salvation. Slowly making his way down the street, Grover spots undead military, which only confirms his assumption that the various blockades around the city had been overrun. Putting them out of their misery and grabbing what useful equipment they had on their persons, Grover starts the process of gaining a few feet at a time as he continually checks the various vehicles cluttering the street. only finding useless cars and trucks as he finally makes it to the blockade, Grover simply shrugs at his misfortune, as the bridge was impassable anyway. Stopping to take a break and finally replace the tacky helmet he had despised since putting on, Grover cherishes the reliable therapy of a cigarette before readying himself for more bloodshed. Happening upon another key, but only able to sigh in frustration as the truck is in even worse shape, Grover groans with agitation and trudges onwards. Disappointingly finding his neighboring apartment building devoid of vehicles as well, Grover takes to the streets one final time to vent his growing annoyance on the undead bastards that had him firmly trapped with their numbers. Hearing a distant gunshot as he returned to the safety of his apartment, Grover skulks to the nearby window to witness the masses beginning their tireless trudge. Realizing he was witnessing the other side of the event he had just survived, Grover is forced to acknowledge the stupidity of using firearms before he was truly ready. Keeping to his kitchen as he can still hear the muffled footsteps of undead marching past, Grover tends to his needs and then entertains himself by sawing off his shotgun, amusing himself with the image of the ATF kicking down his door.
Well, the bridge is blocked. Guess I shouldn't be surprised. At least there wasn't some eager government boy there to put one between my eyes. Looks like everyone got shafted. Well, not everyone. Heard some other idiot firing off a rifle this afternoon. Watched as a parade of chompers started heading in their direction. Hope their knees are better than my own. Starting to run dangerously low on smokes, and I ain't dying without my goddamn nicotine. Gills.
Having to be partially thankful for the other survivor's stupidity as Grover looks over the cleared streets, the aged survivor prepares himself in his kitchen once more before setting out to complete his to-do list. Still mostly focused on getting some sort of vehicle, Grover points himself in a new direction and checks the other neighboring building in hopes of stumbling across keys and a decent ride. Happening across an auto parts store that he would surely return to, Grover also discovers a pair of keys to what looked like the car parked just outside. Determined to see if this clunker was finally his ticket out of here, he creeps back through the quiet office building before planting his feet onto the asphalt once more and preparing for another slaughter. Facing the disappointment of yet another pointless battle to another useless car, Grover begins to feel his thinly veiled fury starting to surface, as the endless frustrations of this world were beginning to bring out a darker side of him he had long left behind. Resigning to mindlessly wandering back over the streets he had cleared, and cracking open the skulls of the walking bags of shit that stood in his way, Grover festers on his anger as only more broken vehicles line his path. Eventually finding himself in front of the gun store just down the street, Grover eyes the upstairs windows with a bit of curiosity, before an idea begins to form in his troubled mind. Finding a new goal to throw himself at, and latching onto it to drag himself out of his loathing, Grover enjoys another cigarette before grabbing his hammer and getting to work.
Found more smokes. Probably the best thing that's happened since I decided to step outside my door. Still shit out of luck with finding a car that isn't beat to hell and back, but the streets are so clogged with those frickin' chompers that it might not be worth it anyway. It's strange how quiet it is, especially after all that happened. I'm slowly working towards the hospital to the west, and God only knows what waits for me there. Gills.
Waking up to a view of his city cast in a downpour, Grover pulls his sluggish body from his bed and brings the full force of his will down upon his new objective. unprepared for what he must do as the stormy night continues to rage around him, Grover finally reclaims his apartment as a home and settles into the welcome comfort with thoughts of tomorrow dominating his mind. Tired and groggy eyes opening to the dim light of his apartment, Grover is awoken by the distant sound of persistent growls and frantic banging that forces his aching body to rise from the warm bed. Gingerly making his way downstairs with a knife firmly in his grip, the agitated senior finds his handiwork being battered against by the relentless undead and steps out into the rainy night to see the annoyances dealt with. Returning his small intersection to a relative quiet, Grover drags his wet and sluggish body back upstairs to try and get a few more hours of sleep in preparation for his upcoming plan. Rising to a rainy dawn, and already knowing he hadn't gotten the full rest he needed, the frustrated survivor settles his grumbling with a morning smoke and focuses his mind on the task at hand. Having a plan for getting into his friend's gun store, Grover gathers the stray lumber he had set aside and takes to the wet streets to clear the undead around his target. First putting up framing before hammering together a rudimentary wall, Grover begins to make his way over to the nearby alley to secure a ladder that was hopefully his ticket into the wealth hidden behind the barricaded storefront. Slightly concerned by the horde shambling around the nearby intersection, the old man pulls himself up onto the second floor before spotting Connor, the store owner, standing amongst more undead. Dispatching the men that had thought themselves safe within the shop, Grover moves downstairs to find a secured door before retrieving Connor's shotgun and discovering his main stash upstairs. Knowing that plenty more weapons and ammo still resided below, Grover begins the loud and tiring process of bashing and beating down the hefty door before his earlier fear comes to fruition. Watching the horde from the east accumulating outside the store as he breaks into the main room, Grover worries for a moment that their mindless strength would put them through the shop front before he watches with relief as they smash harmlessly against the glass. Slowly realizing he was trapped, Grover searches through the various display cases as his stomach growls, an unwanted reminder that he had forgotten to eat this morning in his excitement to make it into the store. Having his situation only worsened by the sudden blaring of a car alarm, Grover holds back, flying into a pointless rage as he tries to figure out a way to clear the undead despite his groggy and protesting body. Knowing he wasn't going to be able to wait for them to disperse, and not having the energy to take them out with his axe, Grover decides to risk the wrath of going loud and loads up Connor's shotgun. Ears ringing, Grover grumbles at the bulletproof glass and frustratingly watches as more of their ceaseless numbers pile up in his view. Convinced to have to take care of them from the flimsy balcony, the weary survivor loads up a reliable revolver and crawls outside to begin his bloody work. Heart pumping and fingers itching as Grover looks over the street he had painted red. He checks downstairs to see a few stray shamblers still beating themselves to death against the glass, and opts to give his body a well-deserved rest before descending back down into the street below. Able to taste iron in the air as his boots squelch across the crimson puddles, Grover makes his way back to his building to see his various barricades torn down by the attracted horde. Clearing his building yet again, as his stomach begins to twist with hunger, Grover places a fridge in front of the lower door and wonders if his rampant gunfire had only been noticed by the undead. Pushing down his concerns as he finally gets some well-deserved food, Grover snuffs out his lingering paranoia with a cigarette before letting his ragged body collapse into bed. Having transferred only a sliver of the guns and ammunition he had gotten access to yesterday, Grover rises with renewed energy and dedicates his day to hauling the essential weapons up into his apartment. Recognizing that he had most certainly put a dent in the local population, Grover begins to enjoy the relative calm now surrounding his street, despite the rancid smell that was quickly swelling in the blistering summer heat. Feeling more confident and comfortable as the familiar weight of a gun rests in his experienced hands, Grover allows the tension from yesterday to fully slip away, as it yet again proves difficult to kill.
Sometimes I wonder if I'm truly protected by God, or just endless dumb luck. First I make it out of the life without getting myself shot or stabbed. Then I avoid catching whatever the fuck this knock shit is. Finally I pull a stupid stunt and get myself trapped in a gun store with 1,000 fucking chompers all around me. But I'm still here, still kicking. Well, not kicking. It's bad for the knees. I haven't felt this alive in years. I'm probably pretty screwed in the head for that. But it's just the way it is. Gills.
Stepping out into the foggy morning to clear the stragglers moving about his street, Grover moves to make his final trip from the gun store, so he no longer has to worry about someone else trying to take it, and his attention can shift to his next task. Checking in on his to-do list, Grover strikes out more of his accomplishments before he settles on securing a vehicle as his next big goal. While faced with the map of his city, his eyes begin to wander towards the southeastern side of the urban sprawl, focusing in on a trailer park that one of his brothers had resided in, and wondering if the rugged biker had also survived this chaos. Further south, he remembers that another brother from his MC had been serving his sentence in the local prison, leaving Grover to wonder of his fate before his eyes fall upon the institution his old lady had been placed in. Imagining what a reunion with his brothers would look like after all this time as he prepares to head out back into the thick fog, Grover feels the smallest flicker of hope budding in his stubborn chest before he quickly squashes the unwelcome emotion. Cleansing the street once more, Grover turns his attention back towards the small warehouse next to his building and begins the slow process of clearing out the space to prepare a makeshift garage. Having not done his own mechanical work in years, and needing a relatively safe place to strip down a sacrificial car, Grover looks over the modest space with a tired smile, before taking to the streets once more to clear the undead and secure a clunker. Spurring on the rust bucket of a station wagon he had found the keys to, Grover limps the pathetic vehicle towards his chop shop. Realizing he hadn't grabbed a lug wrench when he had made it to the mechanic shop down the street, Grover strikes back into the building once more and deals with the strays he had drawn in with the gun store massacre. Truly pleased with himself and all that he had accomplished as he looks forward to getting his hands dirty with something beside blood and guts, Grover temporarily forgets the troubles of this shattered world as he simply becomes a man working on a car. Having accomplished what he wanted with the car, Grover was faced with the reality that his food stores had grown low, so a quick trip to the store was in order. Food sorted, it was time for the stubborn senior to familiarize himself with electronics, pointing him in the direction of the neighboring building and its many sacrificial devices.
I gotta say, thought my little stunt at the gun store would cause more problems, but it's been pretty goddamn quiet since. Maybe some scrappy fucker heard just how many rounds I shot off and decided it wasn't worth testing his luck. Or maybe some terrified desk jockey thought the government was coming to finish the job. Either way, gotta admit that I'm glad everyone else is leaving me alone. It gives me plenty of time to work on acquiring a ride and to haul my ass across Memphis. Gills.
Knowing the only thing standing between him and being able to hotwire one of the suitable vehicles he had found was some quality time stripping more electronics, Grover rises to another rainy morning and sets his sights on another nearby building. Finally feeling comfortable enough to try his hands at an ignition, Grover steers himself towards the bike he had spotted the other day and prays that it was in decent enough shape to claim it as his own. Finding that the old girl was still lucky to be in one piece, Grover curses at his misfortune before reluctantly deciding to check the nearby cars. Discovering a classic Chevy that checked all the right boxes, Grover gracefully allows himself inside before getting to work on the ignition, clumsily hotwiring a vehicle for the first time since he was a rowdy teenager. Unable to hold back the grin that spreads across his face as the engine roars to life, Grover fully acknowledges the target this puts on his back for both infected and humans alike. But the old man couldn't bring himself to care as he pulls his new ride up to his front door. Making his way back up to his apartment, Grover reflects on his situation over yet another cigarette and realizes that there is no longer anything keeping him here. As he had concluded earlier, staying in the city was a death trap, and anyone he'd like to see before he died was likely on the other side of town, though reaching them meant going through an uncertain hell. Not letting fear dictate his life, Grover decides he'll set out the following morning, spending the afternoon packing up his most essential supplies and saying his final goodbyes to his dingy apartment.
Finally got myself a decent ride, though it's not the bike I was hoping for. I'm sure it's gonna be tighter than a nun's knees driving through the city, but the only people I'd like to still see alive are on the opposite end of this fucking graveyard. I can't take everything I've gathered with me, but I've hopefully filled the trunk up with whatever I might need to make it to a new home. If I haven't, then I'll guess I'll just become another one of those ugly chompers, causing a traffic jam. Wish me luck. Gills.
Smoking one final cigarette to help curb the anxiety of finally leaving his apartment, Gills makes sure his hands are nice and steady before he settles into his new ride and braves the crowded streets. Finding them just as congested as he had imagined, he wheels the reliable Chevy through the hordes before hearing their bodies drag across his undercarriage. Finally making it out of the dense urban sprawl, Grover spies a fire station that looks promising, but first has to lure away the lingering dead. Having the larger part of the horde distracted for the moment, the relieved survivor takes a moment to survey his potential home before he'd have to face the infected once more. Like he can fully breathe for the first time since stepping out of his apartment, Grover begins the process of fighting back to his car and realizes once more that his aim still has a lot to be desired. Pulling his vehicle into the garage, the prepared survivor watches the horde shamble back as he readies himself to defend his shelter. Content in his new spot as he clears the stragglers, Grover welcomes the relative ease of the suburban neighborhood as he looks over his new territory and begins his exploration. Reaching one of the neighboring homes, Grover smirks at discovering another box of shotgun shells before he goes about ripping down the curtains and heaving a comfortable chair across his back. Covering up the windows and doors so that no prying eyes could see him moving about inside, the tiring survivor finally lets his guard down as he creates an acceptably comfortable space for him to live for the moment. Waking up refreshed, Grover is determined to clear out the major numbers around his station and secure materials to barricade the many broken windows of his safe house. Wrenching free 2 planks from a nearby window, Gills returns back to his station to find the power finally out and an unwelcome visitor inside. Now determined more than ever to make sure that stray shamblers couldn't dive into his home, Grover takes back to the streets in search of more lumber and fresh skulls. Nearly breaking his hand axe taking down a small tree, Grover is also reminded of the dangers that lurk behind his station before he finally shores up the remaining windows.
I've made it out of the city and have taken shelter in a small fire station outside of some yuppie part of town. The prison and the military checkpoint ain't far, but if I had to guess, neither of them are going to be a cakewalk. Still need to go check if Bouncer made it through this shit, but I'd reckon his trailer park lost some property value since the last time I visited, if that's even possible. Might go on foot, safer, but it's a hell of a walk. Gills.
Being woken up by one of the watches belonging to the dead, a groaning and agitated Grover also finds his joints aching as a proper storm rolls in. Unable to fall back asleep, he finds himself needing to stay busy as he relentlessly unloads and reloads his mags to help familiarize himself with the essential motion. Finally light enough to venture outside, Grover dons a poncho and listens to the low rumbling of the distant thunder as he tries to keep his spirits dry. Discovering that the crackling appeared to be confusing and luring the undead about the streets, the perceptive man begins to form an idea in the back of his head, but keeps himself focused on scouting the nearby buildings. Finding a small warehouse next door that held little of value besides the cans of food in the back, Grover shifts his attention back to the homes still guarded by the dead. Snatching up a small grill to bring back to his home base, the older man accepts the fact that he'll have to start boiling water soon, now that the pipes had ran dry. Battling the disappointment of his lost resource, Grover finally moves to put his earlier plan into action as he heads outside to create his own thunder.
Sometimes I think God is having a good old chuckle watching me pissing about down here. Electricity finally shut off. Guess that confirms that chompers aren't capable of keeping the plant going. This fabulous news was paired with a thunderstorm, which I've been trying my best to stay out of. I ain't dying damp. Did try out the shotgun while the thunder was rolling. Might be onto something there. Gills.
Checking on his nearest source of water by the river, the grumbling survivor finds more patient chompers waiting for his axe. Thankfully waking up to a clear and calm morning, Grover makes it his mission to reach the prison's entrance today, wanting to know just how difficult the task ahead might be. Using the moderate safety of the open space to practice his aim, the diligent scrapper counts every permanent corpse as a victory as he continues his way down the road. Spotting the abandoned entrance he was looking for, Grover first investigates a nearby garage in hopes of a bike, but settles for more tools before heading back towards the prison. Discovering more civilians in the fields than he had imagined, Grover also feels his concern growing as he hears no commotion coming from the distant structure. Surely if Killjoy was still alive in there, it wouldn't be so eerily quiet. Beginning to assume the worst as he continues exploring, Gills spots a sign that provides him an ounce of hope. There was no reason to think that Killjoy hadn't gotten out in the chaos, which meant the rugged man could already be keeping himself safe in the nearby area. Reinvigorated by this idea, Gills tightens his grip on his trusty axe and begins the hunt for any sign of his old friend. Spotting the unmistakable orange of a prison jumpsuit, Grover cuts through the stranger before spotting another escapee amongst the dead. Spying that the other corpse wasn't his friend, Grover still doesn't give up hope that Killjoy might still be breathing. If anything, these two shambling creatures only gave his theory more weight, as they had clearly fled their cells before the outbreak.
Looks like there might be hope for Killjoy after all. Spotted a handful of escaped prisoners in the neighborhood today, which means that cockroach of a man might already be out here. I still should check the prison just to be sure, but there's an odd amount of chompers guarding the road. Maybe it was loved ones trying to reach their people, or refugees from the military camp. Either way, it's going to be a fight. I also saw a place that looked like it might be a better place to rest my head. There's a secure storage unit in the middle of the neighborhood, surrounded by tall fence and some trees. If I wanted to stay safe and out of sight, that'd be the place to go. Feel like I might try to push closer to the prison tomorrow, as long as it doesn't start pouring on me. I better not get my ass chewed on for Killjoy. I'll haunt his worthless ass in hell for eternity. Gills.
Rising with the full intention of driving his Chevy right up to the prison armed to the teeth, Grover is once more held back by the weather as a dense blanket of fog rolls over his area. Knowing the importance of visibility now that he had made it out of the city, the old man begrudgingly decides to temporarily shift his focus to the storage units, aiming to be productive until the fog clears. Crowbar in hand, Grover begins to pry open the secured doors, hoping that each held some essential sort of supplies, but becoming more and more disappointed as the morning dragged on. Eventually popping open the final unit as the fog begins to lift deep into the afternoon. The already tired survivor refuses to take this day as a loss as he loads up the generator he had discovered and gets back in his car to approach the prison. Though he doubted Killjoy was still alive within the prison, Grover dutifully wheels his Chevy down the dirt road to surmise the task that lay before him. Already seeing concerning numbers of infected outside the high walls, he begins to realize just how many bodies he'd have to fight through just to get inside. Attempting to isolate the freaks that threw themselves forward without a care, the reluctant survivor eventually submits to creating some distance and taking them out on foot. Finally clearing enough on the southern end to get a glance inside, Grover spots that his commotion hasn't gone unnoticed, as the masses of undead still within the walls are slowly drawn closer and closer. Accepting he had done all he could for the day, as the sun sinks below the horizon and the cluster of infected rattle against the garage door, Grover gets back into his ride and heads home, committed to returning the following morning. Now more confident than ever that his friend was already dead, Grover acknowledges that his efforts are for a ghost, which he realizes is quickly becoming all he had left. Hearing another rifle shot just as the last rays of light cast over the day, the isolated man half wishes the source would reveal themselves, but he knew that interaction would only end one way. Relatively certain that the other soul would have little interest in the prison, Grover settles in for another restless sleep to build up enough strength for the following morning. Returning back to the large field behind the facility, Grover clears out the stragglers still guarding the towering tomb before he agitates the slumbering creatures inside and waits for their deadly waves. Knowing he had just brought down hell upon him, as he looks over the sea of rotting faces now consuming the yard, the rugged biker doesn't consider giving up, as he simply shoulders his shotgun for another round. Managing to spread them out and wrap them around the outskirts of the prison, he begins to feel the strain of taking on such large numbers, but still doesn't lose focus as he continues to cleave through them. Finally making it inside after a morning thoroughly drenched in blood, Grover enjoys a few moments of relative quiet as he inspects the building he had finally gained access to. Though he still hadn't made it into the prison proper, Grover was confident that he had lured out the majority of their numbers, and now the secured entrance could serve as a good place to launch his final assault. Finding the second level defensible, and holding a locked armory he'd acquired a key to, Grover prepares to make this place his temporary home, and goes about shoring up the broken and shattered doors. Also barricading his own floor from the wandering undead, Grover searches through the desks and terminals to discover Killjoy had been held at the end of the cell block on the ground floor. Determined to confirm his friend's demise when the sun rises, Grover starts to drift off towards a welcome rest before the crashing sound of gunfire roll through the shattered window. Instantly recognizing that the deadly exchange had come from the nearby military checkpoint, Grover feels his nerves begin to falter for the first time, as he acknowledges the fact that if he can hear them, they must have heard him. Having to double check that he was alone within his building before heading back to sleep, He creeps downstairs and shuffles slowly through the dark. Nearly being grappled by one of the lurking infected, Grover's hands begin to shake as he retreats back upstairs and wrestles himself back to sleep. Knowing that holding on to this fear and panic would only allow it to dictate his life even more, the stubborn survivor wastes no time in the morning as he finally approaches the imposing building and begins to lure out its many occupants. Beginning to establish a system as the hours of the day start to drag on, the wary man is fully aware of the dangers of rushing inside, residing to a slow and steady pace while keeping a frequent eye on his flank. Suddenly facing the mutiny of his aged body as his clumsy feet send him sprawling across the gravel in pursuit of a runner, Grover curses angrily at his sorry state before searching for the frenzied creature that had darted out of sight. Confident it had run off as he takes a moment to rest and have a cigarette, Grover's hands tremble once more as his mind tirelessly reminds him of his genuine frailty. Curing his torment with more bloodshed, the spooked senior dives back into the mission he was determined to see finished. Achieving his goal of making it into the cell block, Grover doesn't let his excitement override his diligence as he checks and clears each potential hiding spot on his way to his friend's cell. Finally stepping into the destination he had fought so hard for, acceptance washes over the tired man as he spies his brother's rotting corpse jammed between the nightstand and the toilet. Knowing he couldn't leave him to rot in prison, Grover bundles up the fragile flesh and begins the tedious process of freeing him from the clutches of the tireless undead. Just as he manages to carry the grisly remains free from the facility, another single shot can be heard ringing out from the checkpoint yet again, causing Grover's gray hairs to stand up on the back of his neck as he wastes no time in finally leaving this eerie place. Buckling what remained of Killjoy into his passenger seat, The shaken survivor tries his best to amuse himself with the absurdity of the scene, as the rotten head nearly snaps free from Killjoy's neck as he spins his car in the dirt.
Finally made it to the prison. Waste of fucking time and energy. Killjoy was dead long before I got there. By the looks of it, he turned just like the rest of them in that shithole. I've seen that man survive the near impossible, usually shaking it off with some shitty joke and that goofy grin. Now he's gone. I'd like to imagine he put up a fight, but how the fuck do you fight this shit? Rest in peace, brother. I'll bury you in the morning. Gills.
Unable to shake the lingering emotion that had wormed its way into his heart yesterday, Grover is awoken from various dreams of his now dead friend, as another gloomy morning cements his dour mood. Fixated on finding a shovel so he can both put his brother to rest and snuff out the feelings plaguing his mind, Grover strikes out into the pelting and persistent rain and begins to search the dead neighborhood.
Can't for the life of me find a goddamn shovel. I can't let Killjoy rot in my seat for too much longer. Haven't any of these yuppie bastards heard of digging a hole before? Anyway, I've been hearing increasing amounts of gunfire going off around me. Definitely confirms that there are other poor shits like me out there, and if they're like me, I'm looking to keep my distance. Heard some heavy fire coming from the military blockade the other day, so I'm letting whatever that is play out before I investigate. Gills.
Still stubbornly sticking to his mission to secure a shovel, Grover trims back his unkempt hair and scraggly beard before he once again strides into the rain and throws himself against the endless dead. Spying a row of garages guarded by a sizable amount of choppers, Grover almost welcomes the violence as it distracts him from the ghost now haunting his steps. Finally clearing out the majority of the numbers and searching the open spaces and neglected van, Grover grips his trusty crowbar and quickly gets to work. Finding a unit he'd have to return to with his welder's mask, he also learns that the van only needs gas to run before his search continues. Returning home tired, but barely sleeping, as he becomes almost crazed in his search for a shovel, the retired biker starts to fall into a routine of disappointment and death as his friend continues to rot in his garage. Having sliced his way into what appeared to be a hidden armory, Grover throws his pent-up aggression towards a secure door before it collapses off its hinges. Finding even more guns and ammunition to add to his already absurd stores, Grover starts to wonder if throwing himself at the military blockade was all he had left, though he questioned if he could fully make it through, even after gunning down whatever guarded it. While checking the large shop behind the building, Grover feels as though he finally gets a sign as he lays his hands on a tool that would certainly allow him to carve a path out of the city. Though it wasn't the shovel he had been searching for, the destructive implement provided Grover with a message that he couldn't deny. It was time for him to free himself from this death trap, leave whatever still lingered behind, and find a way forward in this twisted world. Though this vital mission would have to wait just a bit longer, as the endlessly stubborn senior commits himself to disposing of Killjoy and chasing after the slim chance of a breathing bouncer.
No fucking luck finding a shovel within 100 miles of this fire station. You'd think no one had ever dug a hole before, but I'm over it. gave Killjoy a funeral in the loosest use of the term. It wasn't anything like the final rides we used to do, with glistening chrome snaking down the highway, but it's all I could muster at the moment. Also, he was starting to melt into my passenger seat, and I think even he would appreciate keeping my ride clean. Gills.
Striking Killjoy off his worn map as he looks over the edge of the city he occupied, Grover marks out the safest path to his brother's old home and clings to the smallest sliver of hope that the younger man had somehow avoided all of this. Set on searching the trailer park in the morning before going after the checkpoint, Grover rests back in his comfy chair once more and prepares for another day in hell. Roaring out of his fire station armed for yet another bloodbath, Grover rolls down the eerily quiet streets as he grows closer and closer to his destination. Pulling down the dirt road that led to the park and spotting fresh corpses strewn across the road, the cautious survivor feels both concern and hope as he continually scans his eyes across the quiet clearing, spotting even more fresh dead as he decides to ditch his ride and move on foot. Grover's senses are on high alert as he expects the sudden crack of a bullet to be his abrupt end. Following the clear path and eventually spotting a bike parked outside of one of the many trailers, Grover aggressively smothers his optimism as he quietly creeps towards the structure.
Hey, government boy. Put that gun down. I said put that gun down.
I ain't no... Wait, bouncer? That you? Take your helmet off.
Yeah, you old bastard.
Look out, behind you.
Glad they can't sneak up on you.
They ain't got my wrinkled ass yet, but looks like someone got yours. Let's get your ass inside.
For the record, my ass is supple.